Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we're gonna be doing a lot of terraforming, namely on this big cliff here. First of all, we're gonna have to finish it up, so we have to do the right side and the central part, just as we've done the left side, so we have the initial structure laid out, so we have something of a canvas to work on. After that we're gonna be adding a lot of small details, and we're gonna do that using shading, which is not something I've done a lot before, so I'm really looking forward to getting the opportunity to do that today. Now in order to shade the cliff properly, we're gonna need a gradient. And I've got one planned out. First of all, we're gonna be needing some clay, which we can get some of right here. And then we're gonna need some light gray wool. And after that, I plan on using some andesite that then leads into smooth stone, which we already have on the cliff. And then it transitions into some darker colors with tuff and then deep slate and cobbled deep slate as well. And actually, since we're already here in the storage room, we might as well pick up all the smooth stone that we can fit in the ender chest, since we'll need a lot for the cliff in any case. Now back out here at the cliff, we can lay out the gradient, which starts with some deep slate, cobbled deep slate on the darker side, and then some deep slate, some tuff, stone, andesite, light gray wool, and clay. Now the idea here is that we're going to be using the block sides here that face up, and all of them except normal deep slate has the same texture on all sides, but the normal deep slate here, or just deep slate, is a little bit lighter on the top compared to at the sides. I don't know if you guys can tell here. Let me try to angle a block for us so we can take a look. So it feels like this side here, as an example, is a little bit lighter than this side. And I think that makes it transition a little bit better from the deep slate into the tuff. So this is the gradient that we're going to be used for the shadow work that we're going to be doing on the cliff here today. With this clay block here being the light side extremity, which has a little bit of a blue tint. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I think it's going to look quite good, but you never quite know till it's up there, right? So with the gradient presented, I think it's time to lay out the general shape of the rest of the cliffs here. Now if we once again use the FreeCam here, we can see that some of the shape is already laid out in terms of its upper boundary of the dirt layer here. And we're going to be going for the same tendencies that we sort of have outlined here on this side with these arches that sort of goes inwards, right? So that the cliff is very steep and actually inversely steep. Now that does also mean that this part here is actually a little bit in the way, and that leaves us with two options. We can either like extend this further out this way and then have it curve like this over here so that we can just like build in front of it, or we can just push it back ever so slightly. And I think we're gonna go for the latter option, but it's not necessarily something that we're gonna do right now. I think we're just gonna focus on laying out the shape of what we have here, and then in the future we can push it back a little bit and combine that with sort of some terraforming in this area here as well. Now that does also mean that we have to clear out a couple of trees here, since that makes it a little bit easier to keep everything in mind and not have things be overcomplicated or overcluttered by these trees that we have in the foreground. Now with that done, let's pick up some dirt here for scaffolding. Not that much. I think I've overdone it a little bit here. Just a couple of stacks should do. And now with that, I think it's time for us to get started on the actual cliff here. Now first up, we're going to take a look at the dirt ridge here and sort of make it mirror the dirt ridge that we have over on this side here, just in its sort of thickness. And I think that's a good idea to start with, because that allows us to sort of match up the stone part of the cliff with the boundary that the dirt provides, right? And that we also want to have spilling out a little bit further than the cliff. So that's the order that we're going to do it in. So let's get to it. So in terms of the dirt edge, I've decided to never go beyond 3 blocks of dirt, and I also try to generally avoid having it be a completely straight line. This means that we get a little bit of a layered look to the edge, which makes things look slightly less fabricated. Now regarding the front of the cliff, I've changed the slope a little bit just to smooth things over, just because at some point in the future I want a cave entrance to be here, where the two things connect. And I feel that this facilitates that a little better. Now with that work done, I think the outline of the cliff here looks pretty good. And before we continue on with filling it up with stone here on the inside, I have had a thought, and that is that one of the blocks for the gradient that I mentioned that we're gonna get was light gray wool. And if we go over here and take a look real quick, we can see that I don't have that many sheep here at my disposal. And yeah, the pen isn't really that big either. So I think we should change that first so we can slowly get harvesting while we build up the rest of the cliff simultaneously. just to save a little bit of time for later on. Otherwise I would have to like have an AFK wool gathering session for a couple of hours. Now let's go get some fence. I think I'm gonna settle for now for having the pen over here at this little crevice in the ground here. It is a little bit of what I call double work, since it's not gonna be like permanent, it's just temporary, since I do plan on having like a small waterfall with a water stream coming down right here and into this place here, right, which is pretty suitable for a pond. But we need a quick fix for the solution here, and not a permanent one. So let's get some fence here as it starts raining. We can just make some jungle fence. I'll do that real quick and then I'll sleep the rain away here. Alright, so the rain is gone. Let's set up the fence here. So something like this wrapping around, I reckon will do nicely. Again, it's a short-term fix, right? So it doesn't have to be that pretty. And it's also a little bit impossible to make a giant sheep pen that pretty, right? Because it's always going to look a bit like a mess with all the sheep being just like cramped in here. Just added that little detail as well, just so we ensure that the sheep don't escape climbing up the hill there. Maybe if we had mountain goats or something on our hand, they could make that climb. Now I do also need some wheat for both luring them over to the new pen and also for multiplication purposes. So I think it's due time to sort of harvest this bad boy, or the remainder of it. I don't think I actually have harvested all of it at once, since we planted it in the first place. So I guess it's about time, right? Alright, so that's the field. We planted it in its entirety as well. I shouldn't sprint jump here. That's a bad idea. But in any case, we have a lot of wheat here, and we can now safely lure them over and feed them as well. So that's a win-win. Now let's put the wheat in the offhand, chop down this fence here. Alright, follow me guys. Okay, so before we give them something to eat, let's quickly dye them first. I do believe I have a little bit of spare dye here over in the temporary storage system. The chest monster, we could also call it. Since I did have to dye a sheep, yeah we did, there we go. As I was saying, since I did have to dye a sheep in order to get the grape wool that I wanted to show you guys for the gradient. A cat? I don't know when I last saw a cat here. That's pretty cool. Okay, so dye him up. And then give them some food. That way we don't have to re-dye all the wool afterwards, and we can just shear them and get it that way easily. I'm sure you guys knew that. Anyways, that's the first harvest. Pretty successful, if I do say so myself. I reckon we can just leave a barrel here and put the light gray wool that we harvest in there, along with the rest of the food. And then I'll regularly check up on them and harvest it and feed them as well, while we build the rest of the cliff. Now the sun is setting, so a quick sleep, and then let's head over to the cliff and continue on. Alright, so let's get to it. I think first of all here, we're gonna leave some normal amounts of stone that are just scattered like this in the beginning, and then slowly we can start to like curve it inwards, right? I think that could look pretty good. So something like this. And of course it started raining. I hate rain, it's so bad for the bitrate. Now if we run over on this hilltop here and take a quick peek, one thing I'm noticing that, I mean I probably should have expected but I wasn't quite expecting, was that it's just a lot of these layers here that we're gonna have to continue on, since there's really no bend in it. It's just like a completely normal curve that curves around, right? So like we're gonna have a lot of just stone wall that is slightly pushed back compared to the layer before. I think it's gonna look pretty good in any case. Now one thing I'm hoping for is that we can get some larger parts of the wall, right? Because some of these parts are only 2 or 3 blocks wide, and I'm kind of hoping that it sort of tapers off the curving part, so we can get a little bit more wall for our buck. Now I'm kind of running a little bit low on durability here, and I think one of the parts that is taking up a lot of it is me pillaring up and down all the time. So let's go make some scaffolding. Now to do that we have to go get some bamboo first, which we luckily have readily available right over here. Now if we don't cut them down to the lowest level, but the one just above that, we can sort of keep the natural shape of the bamboo forest here. And we don't really have to replant that much stuff. Now I'm not exactly sure how much bamboo each scaffolding block needs, but I hope 3 stacks or just about that does the trick. Now let's enter the storage room and see if we can find some string. Okay, we have 12. How much does that make us? I made a little over a stack, that's fine. We can drop off the rest of the bamboo for later. And we also have a little bit here already. Okay. If 77 scaffolding doesn't do the trick, I'm not sure how much we'll need then. It's a tall cliff, but it's not that tall. Now with some better scaffolding blocks, let's crack on. And crack on I did, remembering to honor my promise of feeding and shearing the sheep frequently. I soon back at the cliff realized that this was a very repetitive task. Now to break the repetitions, I started work on the left hand side as well, and tried to make the right hand side match up in that way in order to give some uniqueness and character to the right hand side and sort of forcing the curves that were there to match the ones on the left. I did make some mistakes as well. One of the central pieces was pushed a little too far forward, and that meant that it didn't quite match up anymore with what I had laid out on the left hand side. I remedied this by obviously just pushing it back a couple of blocks, but that just shows the trial and error that you go through when terraforming on such a large scale. Alright, so back here in the world, I think things look pretty good. It has given us some great opportunities to play with the gradient that we laid out earlier, so we can really get some nice shading work done. Especially in here, there's quite a bit of darkness that we can use to our advantage. I also did remember, as I mentioned, to shear the sheep and feed them as well, but one thing I've just noticed is that we do have some visitors in the pen as well, and that's these two villagers here. The weaponsmith and the armorsmith, which are supposed to be over here by the smithy, and I'm quite surprised as to how they got out. I actually did manage to see one of them, who was up there by the birch tree, and then he just wandered over the edge, down here, and into the pen to his mate. Now, I expected this smithy to actually be like quite hard to get out of, but I think I might have missed a berry bush or something. So let's go do some detective work, since there's quite obviously something wrong here that we have to remedy. I have narrowed things down a little bit so we didn't have to go scouting through 2 hours of footage, so let's take a look here. It happens right when I lead the sheep over here into the new pen. Oh, and there we go. Did you guys catch that? He walked onto the moss carpet, which he's not supposed to do. So let's see what happens here. If we speed things down a little bit. Yep, here he comes onto the carpet again. And while I'm distracted over here, out he goes. He has just left the premises. So let's go take a look at this spot and see if there's like missing a berry bush or something. So this is a spot. Let's break the carpet. But there is a berry bush, so that's not the reason. What I'm then thinking is that it might be because of these two fence. Like it could sort of persuade it to be allowed to cross here. So I think we have to break these free. Because one thing I've noticed, the other guys over here, if I just use some free cam, they have not left. So I think that's because that there isn't sort of anything over here that they think they can path to. I'm not quite sure, but that is the working theory at least. So let's go get a minecart and some rails and bring the guys back into the fold. Alright, this is going to be a little bit tricky, trying to get these guys in there without getting all of the sheep into the minecarts as well. So let's hope it goes well. Okay, that's one down. Yep, okay, we got both of them. Can sheep even go into minecarts? I'm not quite sure. I think they can. Anyways, time to lay down some rail here and get the guys over to the other side. They are outside the pen now. Let's get them back to the smithy. Right onto the track you go, and you as well. And off you go, guys. They are back in the safety of their home here. Let's see if we can get this guy out of the minecart. And we did. And this fella as well. Nice. Okay. Now we just gotta keep an eye on them and hope they don't break out again. They found the workstation, so that's pretty good. Now it's pretty bad that the silk touch shovel here is almost broke, but the most important tool that we have, the silk touch pickaxe, is almost broken as well. And I don't want that to like accidentally break, because I've been using quite a bit to tear down stone when I've been trialing different things for the cliff here. So I think we have 1 diamond left to our name over in the storage room. So let's go check that out and see if that's still the case, so we can repair it just a little bit to get us to the finish line regarding the cliff here. Alright, here we are, and down we go. Let's go take a look at things. This is like one of the treasure boxes I have, and we have exactly 1 diamond. That's not a lot, but I hope we can tidy us over a little bit. Actually, I was gonna make like a diamond pickaxe, but we don't have enough for that. We can just only repair it 1 tick. Anyway, I've also run out of stone, and I think it would be a good idea to fill that up while we're here as well. And now I think we should have enough to finish up the rest of the cliff. This has cost me quite a lot of stone actually, but we will get quite a bit back when we start work on the gradient. Now let's repair up the pickaxe. And there we go, that was pretty cheap and pretty easy. Okay, back over to the cliff, and let's continue on progressing here. We've got quite a bit done here as it stands, but let's finish this up so we can get started on the shading. I don't think there's a lot to say here. I think we're just gonna curve it along here nicely. A couple of blocks inwards compared to the dirt edge up there. So it goes like this and then runs over to this one and connects up nicely. It's gonna be a little bit interesting to see how it looks once we've connected these parts up, because I think there could be some difference in distance to like the dirt edge, right? You can see that this one here has quite a few more steps compared to this one. This has 1, 2, 3. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's some work that needs to be done, but I think it's gonna turn out all right. Anyways, let's get to building. I start the build by trying to build from the bottom up to attempt to match the different rock face levels early on, but eventually I do have to face reality and go from the top down again. I do also try to build a little bit from each side at a time to match things up better so one side doesn't dominate the aspect of the cliff. And I do also plan on having a cave entrance here at some point, so it's kind of important that it looks like there could be a cave entrance, right? Because if I build things wrong, like it would just look out of place for there to be an entrance point there. Now eventually I do get things closed up, but as you can see, I do a lot of tinkering with some of the small details here to make the cliff look even better. Back in the world here, looking at the wall, I've tinkered with it a little bit more, and I still feel like there's some things that could be improved, but I guess that's always the case, right? So let's just move on and get to shading soon. But before that, we have to gather some materials, and yet before that, I just wanted to say that the two guys here over by the smithy managed to escape again, and now I think I know why. I think it's due to there being a spruce trapdoor here before, which I've now replaced with a sign, so I think that's the reason, and not these fence here. Maybe it was both, but let's try to test this now, because I do like the look of having the fences here. In any case, we've also got a ton of wool here if we can get a little bit close. Around 10 stacks, so I think that should be sufficient as well. So that's one of the blocks of the gradient already checked off. I've also decided on a change for the dirt edge, where we're going to be using a lot of moss and some terracotta as well, along with some concrete. But we can craft a lot of the concrete at least, and the terracotta we can get from clay as well. That should be all good. Now regarding the gradient, I have made a change. I'm not going to be using the tough block anymore, because I think the transition between the stone here and tough is a little bit too abrupt. So instead we're going to be using some light gray concrete to sort of bridge that gap a little bit better. So I just wanted to update you guys on that. But we got to get a lot of concrete powder in any case, since we'll need it for the edge here, the dirt edge as well. Now I still plan on using some deep slate and cobble deep slate as well. And I think we're predominantly going to be utilizing it inside this cave entrance, which we're not going to build too much of today, but it's still like nice to get some like color work done in there as well, right? So that does also mean that we are not going to be needing that much for it, since a lot of the cliff here doesn't really need it, since there's a lot of light coming in, right? So there's no like real reason for there being so dark spots that cobble deep slate or deep slate could provide. Now with that said, let's first head up into the storage room to see what we do have on hand and how much we'll need to gather in the mines afterwards. Alright, here we are. I think somewhere around here is the andesite. We don't have a lot of that remaining, so we'll have to gather a lot of andesite for sure. We do have some deep slate and some cobble deep slate, but not a lot. We'll need more than this, so we have to gather a couple more stacks of each. I'm gonna bring some mossy cobblestone as well for the dirt edge. Then we're gonna make a mossy edge, because it gives a little bit of a gradient as well, right? Which can transition it into the stone, so I think that's nice. Okay, and we do have some light gray concrete powder. We'll need a bit more than that though. How much gravel do we have? We have 2 stacks of that, okay. Any sand? A little bit as well. How about any dyes? Do we have those left? Okay, so we do have some dye left that we can use here, along with some ink sacs, and craft up some light gray concrete powder. Okay, that should be sufficient for that. Now we still need some green, and we don't have a lot of green dye on hand. Only 1 piece, but I do have some cacti down by the starter house, so we can go get a little bit more from there. I'm not sure how much we'll need, so I guess it's a good idea to replant the cacti in any case. Alright, let's craft up the rest of the concrete powder here. Now with that said, let's go do some mining so we can pick up all the andesite that we'll need, and some cobble, deep slate, and deep slate as well. And also hopefully pick up some diamonds, because I do need to repair the shovel before we can dig out all the riverbeds for that clay. Now I dug out about 12 stacks of andesite and 4 stacks of deep slate and 5 stacks of cobble deep slate as well. And with that, it was time to go and gather some diamonds. There's one up in the roof here. Now I've been notoriously unlucky with getting diamonds with my fortune pickaxe. But let's see how many we get here. And one again. Has the rates been changed? Because I feel like I always get 1 diamond only. Let's see. And one again. Okay, come on. Okay, that's 2 diamonds. Let's see. That's more than 1 diamond. Okay. Good luck so far. That's 3 diamonds as well. Nice. And this one. Another single. Like, do you guys see how many singles I get? Let's see. Okay, that's good. Did we get 4 there? Not bad. Maybe I'm not so cursed after all. In any case, we got what we came for, so let's head back up. Alright, so we're back up, and I've laid out the things that we've gathered so far here in the chest. But we do need a lot more clay, both for the clay itself and for making it into terracotta. So let's go pillage all the lakes of its clay content. But first, let's sail a little bit further away so we don't ruin all the local landscape here. Alright, so I just deposited all the clay that we just gathered, and I hope we don't need any more than this, because if we do, then we're gonna need a lot more of the other materials as well, I think. And I will have made an extreme miscalculation regarding how much this requires. But we do also still have to smelt some of it into terracotta. So let's go do that. And now we just gotta keep an eye on this, because I gotta make sure that it turns into terracotta. If it's something else, then it's a big problem. It's terracotta. Good. Now while that happens, I still need to gather a bunch of moss, because that's primarily what we're going to be using for the dirt edge up there. So let's grab some bone meal if I can find any. There we go. We do have a little bit remaining. Not as much as I'd hoped. A little bit there as well. Okay, that's fine. And we can enter through the crevice here. Because what I'm thinking is that all this stuff here on the other side will eventually be covered up anyway by like a roof here, right? So it doesn't really matter what happens in here, as long as we don't destroy the edge of it. So if we just do this and that, we can get going. And this would be extremely easy to do if I had remembered to bring a hoe with me. So let me just go grab a couple of those and we can get started. That should definitely be enough moss blocks. Let's see how far this has come. Okay, it's done as well. Now let's use the dye. And we get some green terracotta. Nice. Alright, so I do believe that's all the blocks that we'll need gathered. So I've brought a couple of each stack here into my inventory. So let's head over to the cliff and outline some of the ideas regarding the shading. Now I found that the best way to do this was to shade a tiny portion of the cliff and then explain my thought process afterwards. So I set up some scaffolding and got to work. Alright, so let's go take a look at it. It's going to be a bit easier if we use 3cam, so that's what we're going to do, so we can highlight things a little bit easier. Now the idea is that light is going to be coming from somewhere up here, and it's going to be projecting down onto this cliff here. And that means that these parts here that I've highlighted with the clay blocks are going to be having lights from multiple sides. So they're not only going to be having light like all the other blocks here on the front surface, but also from the side here. And that makes them shine a little bit more than they would have otherwise. So that's the reason for them being a little bit more visual in their tone and a little bit more abrupt compared to some of the rest of the gradient. Now continuing on here, we're going to use the rest of the gradient, namely light gray wool, to sort of transition on further, as that is a little bit darker as it only gets hit on one side. And as we continue on, things get hit less and less, so we also have some andesite, right? So we have some clay and light gray wool and some andesite. And even on other parts here, we use some stone as well that is mixed in. Now, one thing that is quite important to remember, which I've done sort of all right, but not like optimally at this point, is that you shouldn't be using like the gradient religiously, so to say. So something like this where I've used clay, light gray wool, and andesite, that's very like forced if we only did that. It's fine in some portions, but if that's the only thing you do, things are going to look a little bit weird and very fabricated. So it's good to smooth things over, and one way to do that is to sort of interchange the blocks of the gradient once in a while. And we can see that, for example, right here, where we have clay, then andesite, and then light gray wool, for example, right? So that makes things slightly less abrupt in terms of the gradient. Now I've used some light gray concrete as well, and as you can see, there's a pattern to this. All of them are tucked away in the corners, and that's on purpose because, well, these blocks here, or these locations that the blocks are in, don't have that much light, since they're not only covered by a block here, but also apply a block above them, right? And that makes it quite a bit darker. For example, this one is also fairly dark, but it has a little bit more light from the top going in, so it shouldn't necessarily be light gray concrete. Now again, I've deviated from it in some locations, for example here, where we use 2 light gray concrete blocks, but that's a part of the charm, right? You gotta establish some ground rules for your build, and then make sure you break them often enough so things don't look too repetitive. Now with the guidelines for the shading outlined, there's not much more to say, so I'll get to shading, and let's get to it. So the cliff part of the cliff is all done, and let's talk about it. First, here on the left side, I really like how the shading played out. I really think we utilized the gradient well for that. And I do think once you get a little bit further away that the transitions here do look quite smooth. I also like that there's not that much clay, so it doesn't like overshadow things and draw too much focus away from the rest of the shading work that we've done. I especially like this part, right? Because if light comes up from here and goes down onto here, I feel like this part of the cliff would cover up part of this part of the cliff. I'm saying cliff a lot of times here, but stay with me. I feel that this part then would be a little bit darker, and then it transitions into some light parts, and then once again I feel like some of the overhang here again covers up the left side, so we sort of have a bright spot here in the center, and I really like that. I think it's turned out pretty good. Now here for the central part, I'm not sure I'm really fancying every part of it. Like, I feel like maybe I should have cut off all the clay here at somewhere like this, right? So we didn't have it all the way down. Now, for the right side, I also think this turned out very nice. We have the clay along the top, and I think it doesn't take too much focus away from the rest of the shading work. It's a nice highlighting effect, but nothing more than that. I've tried to transition it a little bit, so we actually start using some deep slate here to really make it like the dark points stand out, right? And also you can see here, we use a lot of light gray concrete on the innermost layer. So I think that's pretty cool. This has turned out very nice. Now next up, I'm gonna be transforming all of the dirt edge, and then I'm also gonna tinker a little bit with the front to make things a little bit more presentable. So let's go. For the moss edge, I switched grass blocks to moss blocks, and then for the dirt blocks, I used the terracotta and concrete that we gathered earlier. Now for the front, as mentioned, I removed quite a few of the lower clay blocks to sort of give it a bit more of a balanced feeling, so it's not just overdone. I replaced the clay blocks primarily with the wool, but also a little bit of andesite so things aren't too monotone. I also start work on the cave entrance and use some deep slate for that as well. I really think that the moss edge, along with the work that we just did on the front, has really taken the cliff to another level, and I'm quite happy with the results. I also like the sort of dark aspect that we have here in the cave entrance, and we're gonna customize that a lot more in the next episode. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. I enjoyed making this video, I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.